All right. As we start here, what do you want me to title
Sure.
you as, John?
Legal director at Public Knowledge, and it's John Bergmayer.
Bergmayer. Okay, not mayor.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So let's begin first off with the federal government. The executive order signed by Donald Trump says they're going to push back on the most onerous examples of state regulations when it comes to AI. What's that mean to you?
Well, a lot of states have enacted what I think are like pretty good consumer protections, and maybe some states have good laws, some states have bad laws. I think the important point is the president doesn't have the authority to just sign an executive order and preempt states. Really, only Congress could do that.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen this in other examples, right? I mean, have there
Mhm.
been other ways that you've seen the president do this since January that apply to some different issues here at all?
Sure, there's a number of things. One tool the federal government has, and that this administration has used a lot, is sort of conditioning funding, withholding federal funding. That's something the government does. That's a tool to have available to them. But the rest of the executive order, a lot of the reporting says, oh, they're preempting states. They're saying that states can't enforce their law. All it really does is it sets up a task force and it tells the DOJ to sue states, arguing that their particular laws are unconstitutional. Usually if a state passes a law that's unconstitutional, companies don't like it, they sue. Usually the federal government doesn't go ahead and like swoop in. But it's really not surprising that they're having to resort to this because every time they've proposed something like this in Congress, it's rejected by both parties pretty comprehensively.
Yeah, that's what we saw, of course, with the first iteration of the reconciliation plan earlier in
Yeah.
the spring, and the pretty was almost unanimous, and the Senate said we don't want this in there. But it does feel different than a moratorium, right? I guess that's what they're looking at here. Is that how you interpret it as well, in terms of the task force instead of a 10-year ban on this?
Yeah, I mean, a 10-year ban. I mean, Congress sometimes passes like these 10-year bans and then they get renewed. Who knows what that means? I think in this case, what they're looking to do is say, oh, no, states, you have laws that are unconstitutional. One thing they keep saying is, well, you're trying to regulate interstate commerce as if somehow that's something that states aren't allowed to do. I'm sorry, the Supreme Court in 2018 just backed up that states are allowed to regulate quote unquote interstate commerce. California has laws about pork sales in their state, and most pork comes from out of state. It went to the Supreme Court. And all that states aren't allowed to do is discriminate against out of state companies in favor of in state companies. That's what states aren't allowed to do. But beyond that, if states want to have their own health and safety laws, if states want to have different ways of protecting children in their state, they really should be allowed to do that. And under the Constitution, they are.
Can they? I guess the way you're speaking to me now does sound like I kind of know the answer to this, but can they pick and choose? Because some of the rhetoric coming out of that press
Right.
conference was saying, we want, you just mentioned some of the child safety aspects. Maybe we'll keep those in
Sure.
the books, but other ones we might say that you can't do that. Can they pick and choose?
Well, sure. I mean, that is a difference between the leaked executive order that happened a few weeks ago and this one is they carved out and they said, okay, we're not going to try to get rid of child safety. We're not going to try to get rid of stuff that's about like data center placing. There's a lot of like really politically unpopular things that a lot of AI companies are up to. And they did try to like carve those out. But I think that's like nibbling around at the edges. The fact is, they really don't have the authority to do this. And once again, like the United States Congress is free to act, it's free to pass a national AI standard. Maybe in some respects we need one, but we really do have to just follow the Constitution, follow the law. And to the extent that the executive branch, the president, the FTC, they want to investigate things. They want to say that these laws are problems. They want to make recommendations. That's all. They're free to do that. But beyond that, executive order is just a memo from the president to other people who are his employees, telling them how to do their jobs. It's not the law. It's not some sort of decree that everyone must obey. And I have a feeling that a lot of states, including red states, by the way, are going to be pushing back on this.
Yeah, we've seen Ron DeSantis in Florida already
Right.
speak out, which is obviously that's his party. So which is interesting.
Mhm.
In terms of what these task forces, whatever, are supposed to do, is this, from what you understand, enacted legislation and future legislation, or is it just one type? Is it just a broad array that they're going to look at?
Yeah, what they're looking to do is basically have a Department of Justice task force look at individual state laws and say, well, we think that this one is unconstitutional, maybe because it forces companies to engage in speech they don't want to engage in terms of warnings and disclaimers. And that would be potentially a First Amendment problem, is the theory. Or, their theory that somehow if you're regulating AI at all and send AIs out of state, that you're not allowed to do that. That's one thing. They're having the Federal Trade Commission look to see if state laws are potentially, they argue, ordering companies to violate the federal prohibition on companies engaging in unfair or deceptive acts and practices. So there's like a sort of laundry list. There's stuff for like lots of different agencies to do, but it really doesn't amount to much. I think what it does do is, number one, the threat to withhold funding, that is politically powerful. I think it's probably illegal, but it's something that, if states need that funding, very often it's pretty effective. And it also just like has a chilling effect on other states. Like the next time a state looks to enact like some sort of law, the lobbyists are going to come in and say, is this really something you want to do? Because, you're going to get the federal government like breathing down your neck. So it's a political statement, I think, more than a document that has like a lot of real legal force in and of itself.
Is this threat to the federal funding different at all than the other threats that have been made when it comes? I know the sanctuary status, that was one of them, and along with the newest one was the bail reform or the capitalist bail municipalities. Is it different than that at all? Or is it just the same threat?
Every time Congress passes a law that sort of like orders the president to spend money, because that's, we talk about the executive branch. What did the executive branch do? It executes the laws that Congress passes. And sometimes that is dispersing money. And sometimes the particular statute gives the president or the administration as a whole discretion about when to dole out the money and when not to. Sometimes it doesn't. So it's really hard to answer, like in the abstract, like, are they allowed to withhold funds? This particular funding, though, is something called the BEAD program, which is about broadband deployment. And to me, the connection of AI regulation to somehow making sure that places with poor broadband get connected is really quite tenuous. But they're the ones writing the checks, and unfortunately, that does give them, I think, like a lot of leverage in the meantime.
So if Congress had done this, hypothetically, they probably would have had a better chance procedurally, right? To have this actually be something that is on the books, right? I mean, as we know, this is likely going to be challenged in court, this executive order. But Congress, if they had done it in their bill or in the defense spending, whatever, that would have been different, right?
Yeah, it's more like the executive order will remain in place. It's just that the particular actions that the government agencies under the president are taking pursuant to the executive order, those actions might be challenged. Like the president can try to tell his employees basically, how to do their jobs. If it was passed by Congress, Congress has the clear power to pass laws of this kind. Congress has the constitutional power to regulate interstate commerce, AI crosses state lines. So I think it's within their constitutional authority to do it. Of course, the problem is they can't agree on what to do. So as a result, nothing happens. But at the same time, we really should not give up on the fact that, that's really how it has to get done. And ultimately, if people want to enact some sort of like nationwide AI standard that would preempt states, people are going to have to get together and figure out a compromise that can pass Congress and get signed by the president. And bam, we have a law.
I know we alluded to this briefly, but what do you see happening next here?
There's a lot of task forces that are going to be formed. There's a lot of reports that are going to be written. Part of the executive order is just, these two government officials are supposed to get together and jointly produce a recommendation to Congress. All that stuff is going to happen. Whether it has any effect on what states actually do, I'm pretty skeptical. Maybe at the margins, some states give up on plans just because they want the broadband funding so much. But at the same time, a lot of these laws that states are passing, they're passing them because they're very popular, because the voters demand it. So ultimately, I think that politicians in the states are going to be responsive to their actual voters and not to empty legal threats.
John, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you gonna have like a clip or something that you can share when when you got it?
Yeah. Yep. I'll send it to you guys.
Brad. Sure. Okay. Thanks. Well,
cool.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks so much. If I don't talk to you, have a good holiday.
Yep. You too.